All right, thanks everyone for joining us today. My name is Sarah LaSalva, and I'm going to be moderating this session. Today, we have the Green G Working Group from the Next G Alliance here, and we're going to talk about key sustainability indicators for next generation radio network technologies. Next slide. So with me here today, I have a fantastic group of panelists who've helped look into this, some of these KPIs pretty extensively. So first up, we have Bhushan Joshi, and he is the chair of the Next G Alliance Green G Working Group and the head of sustainability and corporate responsibility for Ericsson North America. He has over 15 years of experience in developing and deploying corporate sustainability programs with expertise in business development, energy management, renewables, and sustainability reporting. He is an advocate for the decarbonization of the telco sector and its role in enabling exponential climate action. As a sought-after public speaker, Bhushan has presented at renowned events and holds an MBA in sustainable business practices. Next up, we have Gagandeep Bhatti, and he is a senior standardization specialist where he is leading and driving Nokia's contributions to the Green G Working Group, as well as contributing to research in pre-standardization and standardization for 6G, including 3GPP 5G advanced network energy savings. He currently serves as the vice chair of the Green G Working Group within the Next G Alliance. Next is Ian Deacon, a distinguished principal technologist at the Alliance for Telecommunications Industry Solutions, or ATIS, bringing over 30 years of experience in the ICT industry to the forefront. Currently steering digital transformation initiatives, Ian is a key driver behind ATIS's endeavor in identity, privacy, distribution ledger technology, and quantum security. A forward-thinking leader, Ian's career spans senior management positions with noticeable organizations such as iConnective, CMG Telecom, Motorola, O2, and Siemens Nextdoor. His commitment to innovation extends to the cutting edge, where it is actively contributing to defining the landscape of 6G telecom. Next, we have Lola Awaniyi Oteri, and she is a principal systems engineer within the Qualcomm Research Organization. In her current role, she's involved in standardization, research, and development for 5G and 5G advanced technologies, as well as research for next generation wireless technologies. Lola has over 18 years of professional experience working on wireless technologies for improving connectivity performance and enabling environmental sustainability in wireless systems. She received her BS degree in electrical engineering through a joint program with Clark Atlanta University and Georgia Tech, and holds a master's and a PhD in electrical engineering from Stanford University. Lola has authored over 300 worldwide patents in the wireless communications field. And finally, we have Gary Lee. Gary focuses on 5G and 6G standards development at Intel. He also serves as the vice chair of the IO1 Global Forum Technology Working Group. Gary has over 25 years of work experience in the ICT industry, specializing on mobile network systems and network engineering. Prior to joining Intel, Gary held a senior solutions architect position at Ericsson, where he performed LTE, UMTS, GSM, and CDMA network performance, capacity analysis and troubleshooting, end-to-end network dimensioning, engineering service development, and customer interface. Gary also has his MS and PhD from Stanford University. So thank you to all of my panelists for participating today. I know we're going to have a great session. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to Bhushan, who can give us an overview about the Green G Working Group and what we're going to talk about today. Thanks, Bhushan.
Great, wonderful, Sarah. Thank you so much for those amazing introductions. And really welcome to everybody who, and thank you for taking the time to join us today in this really great discussion. Housekeeping rules, please ask questions. You can put them in the chat, and then the moderator will pick them up and they'll address them to the panelist. So I'll kick off by saying, we live in this world where the environmental impacts of climate change are being felt in our communities right now. This is not a future that's somewhere, this is not something that's happening in the future, it's happening today. the last 9 years have been the warmest years on records, according to NASA, and that's since we started keeping records of global climate. So this is really a big challenge for us. Addressing climate change is one of the largest and the biggest challenges that faces humanity today. And that's kind of really intersects with the mission of the Green G Working Group. And the mission of the Green G Working Group is really focused on making sure that, North America is a leader in environmental sustainability when it comes to next generation wireless technologies. Our goal is to focus on integrating sustainability or environmental sustainability into Next G standards and the global communications industry. The working group, which I have the honor of chairing along with Gagandeep Bhatti, the vice chair from Nokia, and then Ralph Bendlin from AT&T, with support from Ian and a lot of people. We're really focused on kind of 4 key topics. The first one really is to understand how can we drive reduction in energy consumption and reduce the environmental impacts of next-gen technologies. We're also focused on assessing the environmental impacts that go beyond energy and emissions, things like water consumption, use of materials within the next-gen technologies. And we're trying to look at how renewable energy and ambient energy devices could be used to enable the decarbonization of the ICT industry. And while we're doing that, we're also focused on investigating how the ICT industry can enable the decarbonization of other industries. ICT has this power through connectivity to enable other sectors to be efficient and to decarbonize. So we're focused on looking into that as well. So if you go to the next slide, what I'll do is I'll kind of step you through the path that we have been. So with the founding of the group, in 2022, we released our first white paper. And the first white paper, what it did was it provided a detailed scale or of the climate challenge that we face. We also looked at what are the different environmental sustainability aspects of the ICT sector, and some of the challenges and opportunities that the ICT sector is going to encounter as we work towards this decarbonization pathway, and we also support the decarbonization of other sectors. And we provided a clear call to action for the ICT industry to reach net zero emissions at the latest by 2050. The subsequent white papers that we've been working on, 2 of them released last year in 2023. The first white paper that you see on here provided an overview of the currently available sustainability KPIs that exist within the ICT ecosystem. We understand that the environmental impacts of ICT are not limited to just emissions and energy consumption, but we also looked at things like water consumption, land use, and that was our focus. We know that 5G was designed with efficiency in mind, but we also understand that 6G needs to be designed, manufactured, and built with net zero in mind. And so this paper provides details on the challenges. The paper that we recently released and the one that we're going to talk about now was focused on those specific KPIs for the RAN ecosystem, within RAN in the ICT ecosystem. So what I'll do now is I'll pass it over to, and before I do that, so the next white paper that we're working on is going to be focused on data center and core network. So we're going to look at KPIs, environmental sustainability KPIs, as they apply to data centers and core networks. So please stay tuned. You can access all of the white papers that I just mentioned by scanning the barcode and going to the ATIS webpage to download them. I'll pass on to my friend Gagandeep Bhatti, and Gagan is going to provide us an overview of the most recent white paper that we released. So Gagan, all yours.
Thanks, Bhushan, for the excellent introduction of our Green G Working Group and white papers. Hi, everyone. This is Gagandeep Bhatti, and I'm going to share in brief about a recent released white paper and then move to our very engaging panel discussion. As mentioned in this slide, this paper presents an evolution of sustainability indicators, and it also provides guidelines to ensure sustainability is the foundation for designing the next generation radio network technologies. It discusses current and future environmental sustainability KPIs, as well as technological enablers critical for the transition from sustainability aware to sustainability native next generation wireless technologies. Furthermore, as mentioned in the slide, it explores the three critical pillars towards sustainable 6G design, that is observability, choice, and circular economy, that provides an enhanced and novel approach for implementing KPIs. It identifies key sustainability indicators and technologies essential for sustainability native next generation radio network technologies. Can we move to the next slide, please? As mentioned in this slide, this famous figure illustrates how 6G will be both an evolution and revolution compared to 5G. From the evolution standpoint, 6G will be continuing improvement of current services, that is enhanced mobile broadband, ultra reliable low latency communications, and massive machine type communication services. Moreover, 6G will expand the existing scope by expanding 5G usage scenarios to include integrated sensing, AI, and ubiquitous connectivity, truly transitioning towards sustainability native 6G. As mentioned in this slide, it is truly revolutionary. Can we move to the slide 3, please? As this slide mentioned, this white paper, and also I mentioned earlier as well, this white paper introduces three crucial dimensions and novel dimensions: observability, choice, and circular economy, that provides an enhanced approach for implementing KPIs that ensures integration of environmental sustainability principles in design and operation of next generation wireless technology. As mentioned in the slide, observability is to track and report environmental indicators. Starting with the design and standardization of 6G system, observability is key to assess the development of 6G technologies. Moving on to choice. We mentioned in the white paper, the concept of choice is empowering carriers and users to exercise preferences in selecting sustainable 6G services. It is powerful. Circular economy. Adopting and embracing circularity is the key to achieve net zero. Renewable products, reuse of resources, recovery of materials and components are all essential part of the circular economy. By following these crucial dimensions that we explored in this white paper, we want to create sustainable next generation technologies to make the world greener for future generations. Please read this white paper for further details. It is very interesting. With that, I hand over to Sarah for the very interesting segment of this webinar, that is panel discussion. Over to you, Sarah.
Thanks, Gagan. And so just to kind of summarize what we this really three main takeaways from this paper that we wanted to focus on. First is that we need this new way of thinking about KPIs and having key sustainability indicators for reaching net zero emissions. Next, we need technological enablers for that transition to a sustainable native 6G. And finally, as Gagan just introduced in the last slide, is the importance of the three pillars that observability, choice, and circular economy for implementing key sustainability indicators. So keeping those three takeaways in mind, I'm going to go ahead and start with the open discussion with a goal of getting a little bit deeper into all of these topics. I have some prepared questions that I can ask the panelists, but please do, as Bhushan indicated, please type in your questions and I'll go through them and try and answer as many as we can. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and open up with the first question. So addressing climate change is recognized as one of the biggest challenges facing humanity. What is the role of the ICT sector in addressing this challenge? Bhushan, I'm going to give that one to you. Can you let us know about that?
Yeah, happy to take this one on. So as I mentioned when I opened, addressing climate change is one of the biggest challenges that is facing humanity today. I was reading reports from the World Meteorological Society that July 2023 was one of the hottest months on record. So climate science is clear. To avoid the worst impacts of climate change, we need to cut emissions and ensure that the global temperature rise is limited to below 1.5 degrees Celsius from pre-industrial levels. And so we have a very narrow and ever shrinking window of opportunity to do something to address this challenge. So what do we need to do? We need to cut emissions by half this decade, and we need to do that again the decade after that and reach net zero emissions by 2050 or earlier if possible. And net zero really means reducing human cost emissions to near zero as much as possible. And when you have emissions that you've reduced that are left over that are technically unfeasible to eliminate, those emissions can be removed from the environment or the atmosphere by permanent processes that are either natural or artificial. So it's really about reaching net zero in balance. So to your question, Sarah, so there's two key roles that the ICT industry needs to play. The first one is addressing the emissions of the ICT value chain. Now, the ICT value chain accounts for about 1.5% of the global greenhouse gas emissions, but it is growing as data traffic grows, as more coverage is provided, and our lifestyles digitalize even more. So, what the industry has done is we have aligned behind a science-based pathway to reach net zero emissions by 2050 or sooner. And really, this pathway was developed collaboratively with the industry being involved, authored by the ITU, and it was released. And this standard provides clear guidance for the ICT sector to reach net zero emissions. And the key strategies, again, are decarbonizing. For decarbonization are using more renewable energy, using energy as efficiently as possible, and then adopting circular economy principles, things that we address in this paper. But then it's also the indirect impact that the ICT industry can make. And that's how we can enable other industries to decarbonize. So sustainability enabled by ICT. We've seen that the ICT technologies or the wireless or the communications technologies that exist right now can enable up to a 15% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions just within this decade. So the ICT industry has a very clear role to play, and we essentially have to look at kind of two timelines. One is this climate timeline, which is very clear in terms of what we need to do. But the other one is the technological timeline, which is how efficiently we use the technologies that exist currently, the wireless technologies, to decarbonize. And then we design, as to what Gagan was saying, 6G technologies in a way that they're sustainability native and that they're designed for the net zero world. So I hope that kind of provides a good overview of the key role that the ICT industry can play in this transition.
Yeah, thanks. Does anyone else want to add anything to that quickly? All right, so moving on to the next question then. As we embark on our 6G journey, what are the paradigm shifts or evolving trends in terms of the way that we think about sustainability and environmental sustainability KPIs? Lola, can we get your thoughts on that?
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. I think that's actually an excellent question in terms of what are the trends, and I think Bhushan and Gangandeep have actually touched on this a bit. I think if we look at previous generation of 5G and 4G and all the Gs, we see an evolution from a focus at least on power consumption, if we take that as a metric, on devices. We have optimized so much in the Gs on the devices, and now in release 18, they're moving to the base station and optimizing the base station, and the cloud optimization is happening at the same time. So you see at least a trend where we are maybe independently looking at all the components of the ecosystem and trying to make them more energy efficient. But in the 6G era, the momentum we're seeing is actually starting to look at this as a holistic system, right? We want to make energy, the systems more energy efficient in terms of the base stations collaborating with the devices, with the cloud infrastructure, with the core network, and all the services that we are delivering to the end user. Therefore, a more holistic view would be a view that you see the paradigm shift where we're going towards of looking at the ecosystem and saying, how can we do this in a way where it's coherent, where we're not increasing power in one element and decreasing in another, right? So we want to look, we're seeing that trend towards this holistic view. Another view also is looking at it beyond energy consumption, like I think Bhushan touched upon this, in terms of you want to look at even the emissions, right? We want to look at the materials that we are using, water consumption, energy consumption, all that becomes, I think, a holistic way of looking at the biodiversity, impact on biodiversity, right? When we have renewables, we might be deploying solar panels somewhere, impacting the environment. Those are issues, I think, critical issues that you'll start to see a lot of thinking around that within the industry. And lastly, I also want to say that this whole life cycle way of thinking, where we are going from extraction all the way from even the thought of the idea to when we are extracting the products that we are using to actually to manufacturing, distribution, and then deployment and use. We're looking at the sustainability impact across all those chains and how we are making sure that we're making a difference. So you will see all these different paradigms. And then let me bring it back to the sustainability KPIs here. So as we're starting to look at this holistic way of looking at things, we find out that the KPIs we have used before, which is maybe one-sided or one dimension, needs to be multi-dimension now. It needs to be end-to-end in the way we look at it. And also it needs to be dynamic, right? So we want to know exactly what is happening when, not gather the data and then look at it over the month, because there are a lot of dynamics we have in our system. So that, I think these are different areas we see the paradigms that is actually coming to sustainability. And it's a lot of momentum, and I think it's exciting time. I think just like Gangadeep and Bhushan mentioned, exciting time to be in the field. Yeah, thank you.
So
right.
I just want to add that from another dimension that 6G is expected to introduce some new functionality that it's not just like in the past to deliver the communication function, but we were also introducing that the sensing and the computing into integrate the system. So the traditional way that we look at the power efficiency is simply just look at the per watts, how much that the data in terms of the bytes you can deliver, but the way that they integrate the functionality of the sensing and the computing, and we also have to look at maybe that for the per function, what is that the energy efficiency? For instance, like how much that the computing is going to cost on the per watts. So it's not just going to be the simple that a single dimension, but we also look at the different functionality in terms of the power efficiency.
I would like to add to the points, excellent points mentioned by Lola and Gary. Right now, the main focus is to reduce the footprints, right? But things are changing. We are shifting towards getting more value and positive impacts of handprints with the help of technological advancements in 6G. When designing 6G, we need to think about sustainability right from the beginning. I think this is one of the biggest paradigm shift. Another paradigm shift or trend that I could think of is in 6G, it's not about only sustainable 6G technology. It's also about 6G helping other industries to be more sustainable, or in other words, 6G for sustainability. So the focus, as also mentioned by Lola, the focus is not only reducing the negative impact, but also to make the positive difference.
Yeah. Great point. I know we'll have a lot of discussion. One quick point that I wanted to add is, a bit of the social dimension to this, right? So, one of the biggest trends that we're also seeing is that consumers expect companies to take action on these topics, right? And when I think about, I was reading that, 95% of the Gen Z who are our customers now, or will be our customers soon, have more than one smartphones, right? So it's this cohort that really believes that companies should, take leadership on this key topic. So there's this other dimension that comes through in terms of the expectations that our industry needs to rise to. So I just kind of wanted to add that dimension to this as well.
All right, thanks everyone. So how do sustainability indicators differ from traditional performance indicators in the context of evaluating a system or a process? I think we touched on that just a little bit with answers in that last question, but Gagan, can you dive into that a bit deeper?
Sure. Thanks a lot, Sarah, for that very interesting question. If we consider the energy efficiency indicator, right, which are presented in this white paper as well, they can be considered both from the perspective of performance and sustainability assessment. Both sustainability indicators and performance indicators play a distinct role in evaluation of the system or process. And I would like to highlight the following key aspects. First, the context, the stakeholders, and consensus. From the context point of view, I explained that to my 7-year-old yesterday in 2 sentences. When we talk about how well something is done, like his homework, we talk about performance. When we talk about doing well and fair enough for everyone and the broad system we live in, we talk about sustainability. It's then about society as a whole, including all the essential services that our planet provides to us. Hence, performance indicators are linked to the technology being used, while sustainability goals and their indicators are broader, encompassing the impact on overall society and ecosystem. On the second point, as I mentioned, the key stakeholders involved in defining and assessing sustainability indicators, it involves policymakers, regulator, and that requires wider collaboration. Finally, about consensus and the role of standardization. Having common rules is crucial for both performance and sustainability assessments. But when it comes to doing well and fair enough, we need even more agreements, especially for the next generation like 6G to be sustainable. Hence, for sustainability indicators, it is even more essential as it requires wider consensus. For instance, standardizing KPIs or key performance indicators is already there for 5G, and discussions have begun just now in 3GPP for 6G to key value indicators. Additionally, standardization has a big responsibility as it needs to cover in both cases the trade-offs as well, the cost versus impact of fulfilling goals as well as indicators. I hope that clarifies and answers the question.
Any other thoughts from the audience? All right, so let's really dig in a bit deeper. During the presentation, Gagan introduced the concept that we explored more in the paper of the 3 pillars of 6G environmental sustainability: observability, choice, and circular economy, which are all critical for creating what we're calling a sustainable native 6G and reaching net zero emissions. So I want to go into each one of these in more detail. And so let's start with observability. What kind of observability improvement and environmental sustainability indicators do we think we're going to need in 6G? Gary, let's start with you.
Thank you. That's a very good question. That I think that first of all, that many of the current KPI and also sustainability that the indicator will still be used for the 6G. For instance, like that the energy efficiency, which is that how much that the bytes delivered per words, that's going to be still used, and also in terms of energy efficiency, that how much that that the power used by that the communication equipment versus the total power you use. That's the basic KPI is still going to be used, but in addition that we also going to that use that more as that the previous the panelists talk about in terms of the sustainability KPIs, such as that the renewable that the energy ratio, that how much that the energy coming from the renewable that the source, and the carbon intensity of the energy that how much that the carbon emission is going to be caused by that the energy use. And so this kind of the new KPI is going to be introduced in the 6G. Second part is that we needed a meticulous the recording and the reporting of the environmental sustainability, the matrix, to enable at the real time or near real time iteration of the feedback. So once we have that, based on the AI and the machine learning, we can fine tune that the network configuration, ensure that the stability, that the objective is that the intrinsic part of it, the operational decision making. Other thing that we have to keep up with that the 6G, that the technology advanced that by introducing some of the new KPI. As I mentioned earlier, that today that we only that use that the KPI for the communication purpose, but the way that the introduce of the new functionality such as the sensing and computing, that we will need to integrate that the new KPI to measure that the how efficient of the other functionality introduced the 6G. So in summary, that it's basically that the single KPI for the energy efficiency is not going to reflect the overall 6G system, that we will need a little bit more complicated the KPI to show the overall system, the energy efficiencies.
Great, thanks for diving into that. Next up is the concept of choice. So Ian, could you share with us why choice is essential in the context of user and carrier preference for sustainability, and what impacts these choices might have on the development of 6G networks? Ian, you're still muted.
Now I'm unmuted. Hi, we got there. I think actually it might be interesting just to explain it. Consumers are quite powerful in sort of determining sort of their awareness of environment and the power of choice. And we've seen this in a couple of examples. The power of maybe choice through buying coffee from a sustainable coffee provider, and knowing that the money's going back to, this is, in a sustainable way back to the farmer rather than to the big corporate. But even a simple way that, we see now electricity providers are providing a mix of renewable sources, and consumers make choice about where they can buy their energy from based on what the mix is. And so by having these measures they can make choice, and it's quite powerful to actually changing the environment, not just the environment but actually the industry, and sort of driving businesses to change what they do based on consumer choice. So in the same way, preferences for both users and carriers can make to make a choice is pivotal to determining the trajectory of 6G services going forward. So users can express their preferences by influencing the demand for eco-friendly features and practices, while the carriers responding to these preferences can implement sustainable technologies and business models that can align with those preferences. So both of those are really going to sort of determine, how networks are developed, how they're implemented, the technology choices they use, what energy sources they use. So both the users and carriers, by having those range of choices, can select devices and materials for opting to make their networks as environmentally friendly as possible. I mean, an example of that, to give a good example, is that by using KPIs to measure, aspects of the network, two pieces of equipment could report that one is more energy efficient than another. And this is going back to what Gary was saying. But if we look deeper into those KPIs, one might be using renewable energy sources and another one is not. And so different strategies might apply for both the user and the carrier. If the user is an enterprise customer, to say, well, I want to have these kind of parameters when I'm choosing to implement my services, and thereby the carrier needs to sort of deploy that. So you can see right through the layers, from the end user or the customer and the enterprise customer. It's going to put demands on the carrier on the cloud service provider, the software vendors, and any of the infrastructure providers that provide components to implement services that can report KPIs. So in turn, what does that mean really is we're going to have infrastructure and new orchestration tools and protocols to manage session management that can actually convey these KPIs in real time, as Lola was saying, these orchestration tools or session management controls can use to determine, which cloud infrastructure they choose at that point in time to run an application or a piece of infrastructure, and that can be done dynamically. And it might be that there's different costs associated with that to the end user by choosing to do that. Different, like we've seen with different quality of services. So, it starts from actually having the KPIs that can be implemented to allowing consumers to make those choices. Obviously, then that's going to put demands on the carrier, which will then put demands on the technology providers to actually build equipment that's not only efficient, but can actually report information about its sustainability metrics at any point in time. So I think it's going to be quite powerful, and it's going to change the way that I think we see networks implemented and deployed in the future.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Ian. I completely agree. I think there's a good push and pull with consumers. So let's all take advantage of that power that we have. So the last pillar that we talked about was a circular economy. So Lola, can you help describe how a circular economy is going to impact 6G devices?
Yes, thank you, Sarah. I think circular economy, as we all know, it is really targeted this aspect where we are really trying to be more resource efficient, as well as reducing our e-waste. And therefore, you have all the 9 R's, which I will not be going through now, but the repair, the refurbish, the reuse, recycle, and all the rest. In terms of devices, I think there has been a growing momentum, I would say, towards maybe offering services to users where, maybe you have modular components, you can, replace the battery if it gets spoiled, you can replace the display, or cases where, the device is not working anymore, we just refurbish and repair it in-house and give it to another user. But I think the interesting aspect of it to look at it is, what about cases where the device is actually kind of to the end of life, right? It's no longer usable as your mobile device. And there is this growing paradigm of thinking that, you can actually decompose this to usable parts. So for example, let's say the radio component or capability is useful, right? Maybe some companies are thinking about using this as a relay, maybe indoors where you can use it for coverage extension. Maybe the compute aspect is actually the usable part. Maybe you can take this aspect and you can aggregate a number of it and form like a compute platform and use it to power, simulators or any type of compute functions that you have. Or maybe the display. People are saying maybe in the toy industry can take the display or the camera and use it for toys. So you see all these interesting ideas of where we can use the components of our devices and actually use them for requirements and uses that were not even envisioned, when the mobile device was being envisioned. And I think the key point for us as we go into 6G is to start to think about that we would really have requirements beyond that, what we normally do. Right, we are thinking about mobile requirements, the sensing, the communication aspects. But I think there is a paradigm that we also have to press into, which is the fact that what other applications can the components of this device be used for when they are no longer usable for the initial intention. And if we think about this and we build this into the design, I think it helps us better to even go through this whole recycle approach where we're not doing linear thinking and waiting till the end to really recycle, but we are starting from the initial design aspect of it and really thinking, what are the different ways in which I could use this device? And the same thing goes for the network, actually. So I think the whole idea of circular economy would hear more in the 6G era, but I think it's also something, a challenge for our industry to really press into. I know we're thinking more about modular designs and modular components of it, making them easy to replace and remove if not working, but maybe there is more. Maybe there are more dimensions we need to think about this, but I think we would start to see that more in the 6G era, where more thinking about more requirements beyond even just the initial intention. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the questions that came in from the audience was, how are we starting to think about incorporating the concept of circular technology as we're deploying end-to-end networks? So anyone here prepared to take that? Oh,
Yeah. All right. I'm so, yeah. Can you hear me now?
yes, now we can hear you.
Okay, thank you. I was just going to say, along the lines of that I was talking about in terms of the devices, right? The same thing applies for any network, whether it's terrestrial networks or NTN networks. There are different components of it, and the whole idea of thinking ahead of time of when you deploy this, what else can we do with this component? So the satellites that we put into space, maybe there will be other uses of them, other than the communication that we are using them for. Can we build those requirements into them even ahead of the time when they're deployed and designed and being used? And I think that particular trend we will start to see going forward. Even the type of materials we use to make all these devices, right? How can we be more efficient in terms of the resources, making sure we're not polluting the earth and causing toxicity? The e-waste of maybe bringing down a satellite when it's no longer working. What kind of material can we use for that to make it more efficient and more green and more earth friendly? I think those kind of considerations are actually coming up front, but we need to do more in pressing into that more, either for terrestrial and non-terrestrial, even the devices, all the components of our networks we need to consider those aspects.
Yeah, great answer. Thanks, Lola. So to kind of tie all of this back in, net zero encompasses the entire value chain for ICT, and the radio is where most of the emissions come from. So how does this OCC concept inform the choices that need to be made to reach that target? Bhushan, you.
Yeah, I'm happy to take that one, and great discussion so far. From my point of view, when you think about net zero, right, and we talk about these terms in our report as well, is that reaching net zero means tackling scope 1, 2, and 3. So all of the emissions that for the ICT sector in the entire value chain. Now, scope 1 emissions happen within the company's direct control. So these are emissions that come from fossil fuel that's used in backup generators or fleets that are used from maintenance of ICT infrastructure. And then scope 2 emissions are indirect emissions that come from the energy that is used to power networks, right? So those are kind of the two emissions that fall within the direct operational control of ICT sector companies. And then the scope 3 emissions are the emissions that happen in the supply chain. So they're both upstream and downstream from a company's operations. This includes emissions that are from emissions from the use of products that are sold by companies to the business travel that companies have. So going back to the OCC framework, observability, I think observability is key, because you really can't manage if you can't measure anything, right? So to tackle scope 1 and 2 emissions within any ICT sector company's operations, we need to have the ability to measure, have the ability to report on KPIs around resource consumption, like energy use, water use, so that we can continue to optimize how ICT technologies are used to really kind of keep doing more with less, because the demand for our services is not going to subside, right? So we are continuously being called to do more with less. So that is what observability at the right levels will allow us to do. Also KPIs like percentage of renewable energy, Gary mentioned that, for the energy that we do use, where is it coming from? Is it coming from renewable energy sources? And having the ability to know that and transparently report that is key to tackling those two emissions. Then, kind of switching to choice, I feel like choice, Ian talked about this, but choice is really enabled, I feel, by observability. When you have observability, now you can allow choice, to consumers or customers. And having this ability to provide this choice really creates those incentives, I feel, for the ICT sector to provide services that are more sustainable, let's say, along with performance. In the past, we used to focus, I feel, on performance as the metric to optimize. But I think the ICT ecosystem and Next G needs to be not just high performing, but also energy efficient and sustainable. So that's kind of what choice provides. And once you provide that choice, customers can choose to optimize and select the service that fits their needs. It could be sustainability because they have net zero goals, and ICT networks may fall in their value chain, and they want to make sure that the ICT services that they do use are also net zero. So that's where the choice comes in. And to what Lola was saying, I feel circular economy, I think, is a dimension that kind of is an umbrella that covers both observability and choice. For most ICT sector companies, Scope 3 emissions, when you think from a value chain perspective, Scope 3 emissions are the largest source of value chain emissions. So for manufacturers, it could be embodied emissions of their products. For telecom operators, it could be embodied emissions of the products and services that they purchase. And then for the equipment manufacturers, it could be emissions that come from the use of our products. So taking this circular economy approach, I feel, is key, because what it allows us to do is it allows us to design for sustainability. So designing components in a way that we prolong the time frame in which they can stay in the use stage of the product life cycle really enables us to make sure that those embodied carbon emissions that are within the product are maximized to their full potential. These kind of, the OCC framework, I think, is key, because it really provides us the view to look at the whole value chain and then optimize how we use those services. So I feel like that's kind of the way that this OCC framework applies to net zero and how we can get there.
Yeah, great. Thanks for going into that. And how can the relevant sustainability principles be incorporated into the 6G RAN specifically, since that's what this white paper was focused on? So how do we do that, considering both near-term and long-term perspectives? Gagan, I'd love to get your thoughts on that.
Thanks a lot, Sarah. It's a brilliant question. RAN is a crucial part of the entire end-to-end system, and because it consumes the most energy as per widely known studies. If I put in simple words, as also mentioned by Bhushan earlier on the technological timeline, right? The short term or near term, let's make sure sustainability is at the foundation of 6G design. I think that is most important. We need to think about sustainability from the very beginning in how we research, design, implement, and use 6G. And this is already currently happening in 3GPP and other standards. Looking ahead in the longer term, considering sustainability in manufacturing, deployment, and the whole life cycle of 6G, this is key for checking how sustainable the technology is. The information gathered in this stage can also guide us in making better choices for the future technologies, and that is very important. Again, I would like to connect the incorporation of sustainability principles with observability, as we had a detailed discussion today on that. That is keeping an eye on how things are working, providing choices, as Ian mentioned in details, that are sustainable, embracing a circular economy, as Lola explained, and the innovative methods so for the reuse, for whether it is NTN or the terrestrial networks, reusing and recycling resources. So this holistic approach in the near term and longer term ensures a comprehensive and sustainable evolution, and as I mentioned, revolution of 6G. I hope that answers this question.
Yeah, great. Does anyone else have any thoughts on things that we should consider for that?
I think maybe to touch on what Bhushan was saying earlier and Gagandeep as well, is that probably as it relates to, I suppose, our thoughts around building sustainability by design to 6G and the KPI metrics being core to sort of driving the ability to have choice. As an industry, we're actually driving, I suppose, downstream, requirements onto the ICT industry. And then I suppose if you think about it upstream is the enterprise customers that are going to be using 6G networks are going to actually be able to actually have ICT infrastructure that's going to be sustainable by design, and it's all driven by, you know, I suppose the thoughts that we're coming up with about implementing this type of process to be able to have choice around a 6G sustainable infrastructure. And so it's not going to just, it's going to positively impact climate change and, you know, environmental responsibility for the ICT industry as a whole through, you know, just looking at how we can make 6G sustainable by design from the outset, you know, because it's going to have an impact downstream on those cloud infrastructure providers, and it's also going to have or provide choice to the enterprise customers that are going to be using 6G infrastructure. So you know, by implementing this, you know, we can make a positive change to sort of driving not just the telecoms industry, but the ICT industry as a whole, I think.
Yeah, and kind of related on that, and related to one of the audience questions we had come in, you know, the ICT industry, as Bhushan mentioned, we're about 1.5% of the overall emissions, which is relatively small, but are there any ways that the ICT industry should be actively investigating how our technologies can enable greater sustainability for other sectors? Bhushan, do you want to take this one?
Yeah, I can take a stab at it. You know, I think that one of the key areas where I feel the ICT industry can play a more active role, and we are playing an active role, is around decarbonization of other sectors, and the key sector there being the energy supply sector, right? So in the US, emissions from production of energy are one of the largest sources of emissions. And the ICT industry, or rather the decarbonization pathway of the ICT industry and the utility or the energy supply industry are really intertwined. You know, having the ability to, you know, use energy and have a you know, have a relationship, if you will, with how energy is used is going to be key. So right now, you know, we use energy to run our networks. And our ICT infrastructure. Maybe in the future we have the ability to, you know, do things like export excess power that is being created on smart sites with solar panels, let's say, right? So playing a more active role in kind of having almost a partnership with the utility industry in helping decarbonize, you know, itself. I think the other role that the ICT industry can play is that, you know, the grids of the future need to be digitalized. They are becoming decentralized as more and more solar panels. I got one on my roof here at home. And then decarbonize. So it's digitalization, decentralization, and decarbonization happens for the utility industry. ICT sector has a key role to play, right? When you come to digitalization, IoT devices that are installed, you know, sensors installed on wireless meters can help us monitor energy consumption. It can help us, you know, help the utility industry identify faults before they happen, let's say, or rapidly respond to them. So there's a key role that the ICT industry can play in the decarbonization of the utility space or the energy supply sector by not just placing demand for more and more renewable energy, because that's key for decarbonization of our industry, but then also helping the energy supply sector be more efficient in how it runs itself and you know, leverages technology to move from, you know, to move towards more smarter digitized utility grids that are more responsive, you know, to more intermittent supply of renewable energy sources. So I feel like that's, I hope that kind of provides some insights in terms of how we feel we can enable decarbonization on a larger scale.
Great, thanks so much. We're coming to the top of the hour, so we only have a few minutes left. So I just want to remind everyone, first off, thanks for taking time to listen to this today. As we discussed, the contents of this webinar that we're talking about is based off of a white paper and a report that we put together as the Green G Working Group. And I would really encourage everyone to download that, give it a read, and think about some of the information there. But a last question to the panelists is, what do you recommend that the community use this report for and the information that's in it? And how can people that are interested get involved? So probably have time for one person to answer. Do you have any volunteers?
I can take that.
Yeah,
All
go
right,
ahead,
great.
Gagan.
Thanks, Gagan.
Thank you. Thanks, Sarah. It's a very, very good question. As I said earlier as well, and mentioned it as well, a shift in mindset centered around sustainable design is of paramount importance. These guidelines and principles and the concepts, novel concept that is presented in this paper could be used to motivate those passionate designers, researchers, engineers, and even policymakers to establish sustainability as a foundation of 6G. My personal belief is that a strong collaboration within the ICT industry is crucial, as we all need to work together to make sustainable 6G and 6G for sustainability a reality. This is my 2 cents on that.
All right, great. Thanks so much. And with that, we have less than a minute till the top of the hour. So I'll go ahead and just wrap up again. Thanks for everyone who listened today. And thanks to all my wonderful panelists for taking the time to talk with us. And we'll hope to see you again soon on another Green G webinar. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.